There's two more steps needed to complete the seat. One is I want to put as many holes as I can over the entire seat, and the second is I want to reinforce the edge. I'm going to lay out the holes first, but I'm not going to punch them yet. After the holes are laid out, then I'll put the perimeter strip into place, and the last step is actually punching the holes. And the reason I'm waiting until the end to punch the holes is that these hole punches are likely to distort the edge a little bit. And if it's reinforced, it will be less likely to distort. So I looked at two different styles of holes to go on the seat. I looked at using a pattern of all the same size holes, and I looked at using a pattern of different size holes. And they both look very nice. I think we could use either one, but I chose to use the pattern with different size holes for a couple of reasons. One is I think it's just a little more interesting to look at, and the other is when I lay out the holes, some of them are going to have to get closer together as we go around these radical contours, and I think that's easier to make look good with the smaller size holes on the outside. So that's the plan I'll take. And the first step I took toward laying out the holes was to use little chipboard cutouts and hold them in place with masking tape, starting from the center and then working out toward the edge. And I'm sure this could work, but it really got to be cumbersome the farther I went with it. Very difficult to maintain the spacing consistently using all these little pieces of chipboard. Another challenge with this that I didn't mention yet is that I have features in here I have to miss where the seat mounts attached to the seat. I can't put a hole right in the center of that, so I have to offset the holes to miss those features that are already in place. So it was quite a challenge to figure out how to locate holes in a couple different planes so they all looked right. So I chose not to do it with little cardboard cutouts. I used my computer to do a layout to get a nice consistent hole pattern, and then I'll position this layout on the seat, and that will show me where the center of each hole is. So I printed out a number of these, and then I held them together with tape, and this whole assembly drapes nicely over the seat. So there's 13 holes down the center, and I have a center line marked on the pattern, and I have a center line marked on the seat. So I'm going to carefully position the pattern so it's right on the center line, hold it in place with a small bit of tape, and I have some 1/2-inch masking tape put on the edge of the seat, so none of the holes will be closer than a 1/2 inch to the edge. Now let's go to the top edge, and I'll do the same here. I'll turn this around so you can see it. Again, I have a center line on the seat. I have a 1/2-inch tape border, and I'll just align these center lines and hold that in place with a small bit of tape. So this center set of holes has the 1/2-inch border I want at the edge. You can see that these holes are a little bit closer than I like. So I'm actually going to move these holes before I punch them. But I'm going to do the layout of all the other holes first. So the center of this is a little bit tricky too. You can see that my pattern, even though it's pinned in place on the ends, it still has some leeway in the center. So I put a couple of marks of tape spaced equally from the center that will guide me as I locate the pattern on the seat. And one more thing I'm going to do is I'm going to trim some notches in here that will allow this pattern to be more flexible. So I'll get a pair of scissors to cut the notches. So I've cut slits along the centers of all these lines of holes. Now I'm going to position the pattern carefully between the lines of tape here and here, which are equally distant from the center of the seat. So I'm going to pull this side toward me until I have a good line up on that tape, and I'll check the fit on the other side, and that looks excellent. And you can see how the pattern is overlapping here. That's how we're getting this regular pattern to accommodate the curved shape of the seat. So I'll get that one positioned and get this one positioned. So everything's looking good. So I'm going to start overlapping the pattern everywhere it needs a little extra room. So I'm going to reposition a few of these holes so they don't get closer than a ½ inch to the border. So I've cut out a small hole, and I'll reposition this so it's right on the edge of that tape. And I'm going to make sure the center line of the new piece is in line with the previous center line. So that'll fit very nicely right there. And it looks like this hole is going to be okay. So I'll reposition this hole in the same way I did this one. And after that's done, I'm going to check everything to make sure I have the clearance for the seat braces. Remember, there are bolt holes that hold them together, so I just want to be sure that the bolt holes will clear everything. And I think we're in good shape there. And there's a part of the brace that touches the seat here, so we're going to clear that. So I think we're in good shape. So now I'll go carefully over the whole pattern and punch the center of each hole. I'll need to take extra care in the areas where my pattern overlaps itself, but I'll put the center hole right in the center between the bottom edge and the top edge. So I can just eyeball that. And I'll continue this process until all of the holes are center punched. Now I can pull the pattern off. And now I'm going to drill a hole in each one of these centers. All of the center holes are drilled. Now I want to do a visual inspection at this point to make sure I didn't miss any hole locations or put any of the pilot holes in the wrong place. Everything's looking really good, so I'm going to change my focus now and start thinking about this edge reinforcement strip. I'm going to start shaping the reinforcement strip for the edge of the seat now. I did some tests on this, and I'm using a blank here that will form a strip an inch wide when it's finished, and I've added enough extra material here to wrap around an 1/8 inch wire. So I have a bend line scribed on this, and I'm going to align that in my brake to make a 90-degree bend. That's the first step in making a wired edge. So I'm going to align my bend line, clamp it down, and I will bend this to 90 degrees. So that's the first step. I'll use the beading machine to finish the wired edge. Now I want to bend the small flange on this angle up another 90 degrees, so it's shaped like the letter J. And to do that, I'm using a special set of dies on the beading machine. The top die is 4 millimeters, which is very close to 1/8 of an inch, and that's the size of the wire that's going in the reinforcement. And I'm using a 14 millimeter die on the bottom to help work that flange up. I've made a spacer that separates the next die I'll put in place. And this is just a flat die I made from Delrin plastic. You'll see how that works in just a second. So let's get all of these snugged up. And I'm going to make several passes running this through a little bit at a time. And you'll see how each pass works this flange up a little bit. So that's moved the flange up about 30 degrees. I'm going to pull this top die down one full turn and run it through again. So we can go a little bit farther. I'll go down one more full turn on this and run it through again. So that's done a great job of shaping it like the letter J, and now we can start fitting the wire into place. I've changed the die setup so we can tighten the sheet metal around the wire. So I have a 4mm die on the bottom and a 14 on the top. And the wire, you can see, will rest nicely in that J shape. I'm going to use a pair of vice grip pliers to pull it into place, and I've welded a little extension on one of the jaws to help keep it tight in the corner. So let's run this through at moderate pressure, and that should trap the wire. I'll tighten this another half turn and make another pass. And that's done a great job of really wrapping that sheet metal tightly around the wire. Before I start fitting the edge band into place, I want to curl over these edges to 45 degrees. So I have a 5/16 round over die set on the machine, and I'll use that to go all around the perimeter of the seat. So that's done a great job. It's time to fit the edge band into place, and the basic strategy is I put a center line on the seat, top and bottom, and a center line on each part. So I'll keep these center lines in alignment as I do the fitting of the piece to the seat. So I'm going to shrink the edge of this edge band, and that will pull it down into the contour the seat has. But it's very important I establish the right angle of this at the back. And you might ask, how do I know what the right angle is? Well, I'll show you how I'm going to figure that out. I'm going to drape a piece of paper over the seat, so this will take on its own shape just by following the edge contour of the seat. And then whatever angle I have at the back, I'll measure with the bevel gauge. So this bevel gauge shows me the precise angle I need to have as I fit the edge band into place. So I bent 2 strips of metal to the angle I need, and I will clamp these to the seat to give me a support to hold the edge band in place as I do the fitting. I'm going to start fitting this edge reinforcement into place now, so I'll start by shrinking the center of this a little bit. I'll check it against the seat. Looks pretty good. I'll shrink it a little bit more. So it's fitting well from here to the center. I'll work a little bit on this side. So I'll start working more to this side now. So this side is fitted quite well. Now I'll work on the other side and bring it up to the same point. So it's just a few minutes more time. I have almost a perfect fit up on the top piece. And I'll do the same thing on the bottom. I flipped the seat around to make it easier to work on the bottom. And again, I'll start with the center line, and I have a couple of supports that hold this at the right angle. So I'm going to start working on this side first. I'm just marking where the shrinking needs to start. Go over to the machine and just start working it slowly. It's better to sneak up on the curve you need. You can correct it if you overshrink it, but it's better not to. So we'll check it after a few shrinks. I'll keep on shrinking from this point. It's coming along great. So I think I'm close to having the curve I need in this plane, and I need to put a bend in the part in this direction, and that's a little bit tricky to do. If I just bend it like this, the bend won't come out in the way that I want. So I made a special fixture that allows me to make a bend in this plane. I'll get that up on the table now. So this fixture is just a piece of tubing with a piece of flat stock clamped to it, and there's a space between the tubing and the flat stock, just big enough to get the edge of the metal into. So I just need to slip that down into place and give it a little bend like this. I'm going to go slowly here. I don't want to overdo it. Looks like it's coming well. I'll continue that bending. Looks like I've gone just a little bit too far in this area. So I'll unbend it a little bit. Try it again. I'm going to clamp it into place this time. I want to hold it securely. So I'll put a vice grip clamp on this side and on this side. Now we can really see how this is fitting. And I'm very happy with that. So I'm going to bring the other side of this along to the same point. So I spent another hour getting the fit dialed in just so, and I'm very happy with how these are fitting against the seat. So I'm going to start with the top, and I'll tack weld this part to the seat, then I'll fit the bottom, and I'm sure you're all interested to see how I'll handle the junction between the two parts. So the edge is held in place with these clamps. I'm going to start tack welding it to the seat. As I get farther from the clamps, small gaps are starting to show up. I can close that by hammering. I'll put a tack weld right there. I didn't quite get a tack there, so I'll try for this area here. I'm using my hand to hold the parts together so I don't get to add rod. So to make a tack weld, I have to have tight metal-to-metal contact. Let's shoot for this area. That one worked. Where I have an overlap, I can get a better fit by putting a small putty knife between the pieces and rocking the putty knife over. And that'll fix any overlapped areas I may have. So you can see these parts are fitting together quite well, and that's because I took the time to do a good fit up before I started tack welding. So the bottom edge reinforcement is held in place temporarily with clamps. And let's talk about the strategy for joining the ends together. It's not a good idea to have the joint in the wire and the joint in the sheet metal in the same spot. If they're in the same spot, you'll have a weak spot. So they should be offset at least 1 inch. So I'll make a cut on both sides, then I'll tack weld this reinforcement into place all around. Then after it's in place, I'll make a cut in the wire so I have a nice tight butted fit, and I'll weld the wire together. After that's done, I'll take a scrap piece of this J-shaped edge banding, I'll cut a 2-inch piece from it, fit it into place, then I could weld the sheet metal into place covering the weld, and then I'll flip this over and tighten the curl around the wire. And that will finish the job very nicely, and it will be absolutely invisible when it's finished. So now I'll put the last few tacks into place. I'm going to bend this edge a little bit. It seems like it's raised up more than I want. I'll just use some pliers to bend that down to the right angle. I want that to be level. And now I can look at cutting these wires in preparation for welding them together. So I'll put a mark on this where it needs to be trimmed. That might be just a tiny bit too long. No, it's not. I just got that to squeeze together. So I'll use a little vice grip to hold these in alignment as I do the tack welding. You do have to be careful with this because it would be easy to weld the wire to the vice grip if you're not careful. But I believe I can do that. And I'll set my machine to DC for welding the stainless steel. And now I'll tack weld those together. So I'll come back and add a little filler rod to that. I just wanted to make sure I have it in the right location. I'm going to bend that wire a little bit to make the curve more continuous. Okay, I think we're just about there. And I bent this edge strip just by bending it with my hands. It's soft enough that I can do that. So I'm going to mark a section of this to trim. And then I'll fit that into place. So that's just about a perfect fit. And again, I need to put a little filler rod on the stainless wire before I weld the aluminum piece into place. And now we'll sand that down flush. Now I can weld the filler piece into place. I'll get it positioned and hold it tight with some little C-clamps. I'll get it tapped in nice and snug. And now I can tack weld it. I'll double check the fit. It looks excellent. So now I can finish weld this. So the welding is finished. Now I'll tighten the sheet metal around the wire in this patch area. A lot of people would hammer this edge to tighten it against the wire, and that certainly could work, but I prefer using vice grips. I find it gives me better control, and I'm not as likely to get hammer marks where I don't want them. So I'll just start working this down a little bit at a time. Then I'll raise the angle up a little bit. And one last pass should do it. So that does a great job of tightening the sheet metal against the wire. And I should mention that I sanded the corners on my vice grips so the sharp corners don't leave marks in the metal. For welded joints on aluminum sheet metal, I like to make a second pass on the back side of the weld without adding any filler rod. And that helps to smooth off the back side of the weld, and if there are any places that don't have full penetration, I'll pick up that penetration from the back. I'm going to sand the weld smooth now. I'll start with a 3-inch diameter 80 grit disc. And I use a little soap on my disc to keep it from loading up with the aluminum. I'll just do one small section here so you can see every step in the process. So I flatten the weld with 80 grit. Then I'll switch to 120 grit to take the 80 grit scratches out. Okay, that's looking great so far. Now I'll switch to 180 grit on an orbital sander. So those 3 steps are all it takes to put a beautiful finish on the metal. And I'll continue this on all the rest of the welds. It's a lot more difficult to tune up the weld on the inside because it's in an inside corner, but I'll show you the technique that works best for me. I have a very small belt sander here, and the nose of it can get down into that tight contour. So I'm being very careful here, just taking off the tops of any little bumps that I can feel. And I'm careful not to grind into this surface or this surface, just the top of the weld itself. And then to blend this together, the best tool I've found to do that is a clean and strip disc. This does a nice job of getting into that narrow area and blending things together. So if you take your time with this, this tool does a pretty nice job of smoothing out the metal in that restricted area. I've got the weld knocked down pretty well, but I wasn't quite happy with the flatness of the area between the weld and the edge, so I've developed a couple of new techniques to get that smoother. Number 1, I'm using a cut down 3-inch disc on a 2-inch pad, so the edge of this is kind of soft. And I'm going to use that to get into these areas near the wired edge. And I'm using 120 grit paper for this, and that does a much better job of smoothing this area. And then to get the texture out from the 120 grit, I'll go to 180 grit. And I'm going to put this on the pad of the sander, centered, and then I'll soften this edge by wrapping it down against the sanding pad. And this soft edge will allow me to get deeply into this area. So this has given me a much flatter surface in this area. And then the final step will be to block sand it. This is how you really work out the final imperfections. So you can see how nicely that's been cleaned up. So I'm going to go over the whole edge using these 2 techniques, block sand everything, and then the final step will be to go over the whole seat, inside and out, with Scotch-Brite and cleanser. I'll be making 4 different size holes in the seat. The smallest is 1/2 inch, 3/4, 1 inch, 1 1/4 inch. And I'm using the punch and flare dies made by Mittler Brothers. This is the automotive style punch and flare die. These 2 larger dies do actually punch a hole before they flare it. These smaller dies rely on your making the proper size hole, and then it just flares the hole you have. So there's a couple of different size pilot holes I have to drill. Actually, all of the holes except for the 3/4 use a 1/2 inch pilot hole. With the 3/4 inch die alone, a 3/4 inch hole is required. So now we can make all the pilot holes in the seat. I'm going to use an annular cutter to make all these holes, and this has a spring-loaded plunger, and the size of this plunger is an 1/8 inch. When I made these pilot holes, I made it slightly smaller than an 1/8 inch, so this plunger will punch out the slug when I'm done. So I'm going to go down this row of 3/4 inch holes and make those first. So that's all the 3/4 inch holes. So I'll switch to the 1/2 inch annular cutter and finish the rest. So all the holes are drilled now, and I want to deburr these holes. And a very convenient way to do that is with a step drill. And you have to be very careful with this. If you're not careful, you can make the hole larger. Now we'll start flaring these holes. And I'll start with the smallest hole first, the 1/2 inch hole. So there's a draw bolt that draws the two parts of the die together. It's good to put a little bit of oil on that draw bolt because the bolt gets quite a bit of pressure on it. So we feed this through the hole, put the female die on the back. I'll get them finger tight first. Then I'll use a ratchet to snug it up tight. And you can feel when it bottoms out. Sometimes these dies take a little hammer tap to loosen them. So there's the first belled hole. Let's move up to the next size now, the 3/4 inch. So again, I'll put just a dab of oil on the threads. Feed this through the hole. Put the female die on the back side. Get everything finger tight. Snug it up with the ratchet. Now I can loosen it. Now we'll move up to the 1 inch size. This takes a larger bolt. Again, we'll put some oil on the threads. And these larger sizes actually use a ball bearing, a thrust bearing, under the head of the bolt because the pressure gets to be a little bit harder. There's a slug that gets left in the end of these dies, so it takes a little work to get that slug out. And now we'll move up to the largest size. So I think you get the general idea. I'll keep going with this process until all of the holes are flared. With all the holes punched and flared, I can really get a sense for the pattern, and I think it's fantastic. The original seat had a bump in the bottom for no reason I can see, so I deleted it, and that allowed me to add a few more holes. These hole punching dies leave a slight ridge on the metal, so I use a deburring tool to take that ridge off. I learned that on curved metal like this, if you tighten the dies all the way together, the outer edges of the die leave marks in the metal. So after the first few holes, I stopped tightening the dies as soon as the outer edges made contact. Now we'll attach the seat mounts and I'll be finished. So here's the seat in all its glory. It took a lot of time to build this seat, and there are 6 videos showing the process from start to finish. This is definitely an advanced project, but if you want to build a seat like this yourself, there's a link in the description for drawings to make the wooden buck I started with. Thanks to all of you who watch my videos, and a special thank you to my Patreons who really keep me going. Leave a comment if you have ideas for future projects. I'm always looking for something new and interesting. I love making these videos, and I'm honored that you're watching. Please like, subscribe, and click the bell to be notified about new videos. I read every comment, and I do my best to answer all questions. If you like what I'm doing, please click the Patreon link and become one of the great people who help me create new videos.